Steve Jobs' rule, simplicity wins. I know it's fashionable in some circles to crap all over Steve Jobs. He was a college dropout. He used to wear the same black turtleneck every day. He had a weird obsession with calligraphy. And he's known for being a demanding and difficult boss. But even though he was a weirdo who looked like this, he was also an incredibly gifted salesman and CEO. And one of his rules for Apple has become my personal philosophy for life. It's called Steve Jobs' rule, simplicity wins. You might remember the commercial where there are these two guys and one of them is super excited about his new digital camera because it does 10,000 different things. And the other guy's like, dude, what do you mean it does 10,000 different things? It's a camera. All it needs to do is take pictures. This is basically Steve Jobs' argument for why Apple products have always been so successful. They focus on making just a few features really good rather than trying to be everything to everyone. In the 80s, PCs were insanely complicated. Even something as simple as creating a document required knowing how to use an editor and then having to translate that into a word processor. You would need to know how to code just to play games or access basic functions. And when the Mac came out, they stripped away all that complexity and made it so that you could just click around on a desktop and use your mouse to create documents or move files. It didn't do anything that PCs couldn't do, but it made the experience so much more accessible that it quickly became the standard. The iPod wasn't the first MP3 player, but it was by far the most user-friendly. You could scroll through menus with ease using the iconic wheel. You could see album art right on your screen, and the iTunes library synced perfectly. The iPhone isn't the first smartphone, but it was the first one that focused on simplicity. Instead of cramming it with tons of features, they went with a very basic interface that just looked and felt good. The App Store was the real game changer, though, because it opened up the phone to endless possibilities without adding any bloatware themselves. The benefit of hindsight, it's easy to look at this as a bad decision from other companies. They all went wild trying to add more features. And if the iPhone today still had all those features, it wouldn't be nearly as good as it is. But the principle of simplicity doesn't just apply to technology, you can see it in nature as well. Have you ever noticed that the most beautiful flowers are usually the simplest ones? Look at a rose, for example. Now look at this orchid. Which one's prettier? Well, I think it depends on your taste. But there's no denying that the rose is far simpler and yet arguably more beautiful. There's only 5 petals. The orchid has gone through thousands of years of evolution to develop this insane level of complexity, and yet the rose wins. Now, of course, there are some exceptions to this rule. If we zoom out enough, we can see the incredible complexity that goes into something like a blue whale. Its skeleton alone has over 300 vertebrae. And yet the blue whale is considered the most beautiful animal in the world. But the key difference between something like a blue whale and an orchid is that the whale seems almost alien-like in its complexity. We can appreciate the beauty of it, but we can't relate to it. We don't understand it, whereas the rose is both beautiful and relatable. And that's the key to Steve Jobs' philosophy, simplicity. We love simple things because they are relatable. They're easy to understand. They're easy to interact with. We feel like we have some kind of control over them. This is why the iPhone has been so successful, not just because it's a great product, but because the simplicity allows us to feel like we can figure it out on our own. Sure, there are crazy power users who know every little nook and cranny of the operating system, but at its core, it's designed for people who just want to check their messages, play some music, and take the occasional picture. This applies to design as well. I've said this before, but one of my favorite pieces of design is the CD. I mean, look at it, it's a perfect square. There's nothing extra going on here. It's minimal, it's functional. It has a really satisfying click when you put it in. It just feels good. Here's another example. Compare the Kindle Oasis to the regular Kindle. The regular Kindle has a lot more features, but the Oasis is easier to hold. It has a better screen, and the fact that it's waterproof shows how refined the design really is. And it's not just physical products, you can see it in fashion as well. Some of the most iconic looks of all time require very few pieces. A little black dress, a t-shirt and jeans, a blazer, and some nice shoes. These outfits might not be the most exciting or extravagant, but they're simple, they're timeless, and they're easy to wear. But it's not always easy to go for simplicity. Just ask anyone who's tried to minimalism. It is hard to get rid of the stuff you do and need because it makes your life easier. It takes away choice and it can make you feel like you're depriving yourself. But if you stick with it, eventually it becomes second nature. It becomes the new normal, and that's when you start to realize the benefits. Have you ever noticed how much less stressful it is to drive an electric car? You don't have to worry about finding a gas station. You don't have to deal with oil changes. You don't have to spend hours trying to find a mechanic that you can trust. Electric cars are a bit more expensive upfront, but in the long run, it's a lot cheaper and way less stressful. This is why I prefer living in small towns. Things are just simpler, people aren't always in a rush, and there's no traffic or smog. I'm not saying you should all move to the country, but I do think it's worth taking a step back and asking yourself, are you holding on to anything that doesn't really add value? What can you cut away to make your life a little easier and less stressful? What can you automate or outsource so you can focus on higher priority tasks? How can you design systems instead of doing everything manually? Some of this stuff is obvious, like getting organized or paying off debt. But some of it's not so obvious, like cutting away distractions or taking care of your health. There's no single right answer here. It's different for everybody. But I do think it's worth thinking about. A lot of us feel like we're falling behind, like there's a million things we should be doing. And that's what leads to burnout and regret. So take some time and figure out what you can cut away so you can focus on what really matters. Because at the end of the day, it is not the size of your house or your bank account or the number of things you own that will determine how happy you are. It is the peace of mind that comes from knowing that you've simplified your life as much as possible so you can pursue the things that actually bring you joy. So what's your rule for living? What's the one lesson that has helped you navigate through life? Let me know in the comments below. And with that said, I'll see you guys next week.